podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How Are the podcast from Roker Report. And if you listened recently to our trip down memory lane, looking back at our promotions to the top flight since 1990, you may have heard us float the idea of trying to put together a combined best 11 from those promotion seasons, with maybe one or two subs as well while we're at it, and from all of those players who appeared in all of those promotions. So luckily, I've got a couple of people with me to help me. And first, we have someone who I know will have fretted about this and put together a spreadsheet or two to help them decide. It is, of course, Martin Wanless. All right, mate?
Hello, mate. No spreadsheet this week, unfortunately, but I've got reams and reams of paper with scribbles and crossings out and names jotted down and question marks. So, there's a bit of thinking gone into it, but, that's just preparation work. My mind is open to be changed.
Well, that's it. It's me with the spreadsheets today to keep myself right. I'm surrounded by information this morning. And to help me and Martin, we also have the man who was the brains behind looking back at all these years in the first place, and someone who can help because he had a front row seat as a journalist covering these promotion seasons, or most of these promotion seasons. We are delighted to welcome back Ian Murtagh. Welcome, Ian.
Hello there. Well, I haven't got the brains to devise a spreadsheet. I leave that to my brother, who was an accountant. But listen, I am an expert in my own mind on compiling best 11s. My friends and I were working out the British and Irish Lions first Test match, and I go to sleep at night thinking best West Indian cricket team, best this, best that. It's fantastic. I'm sure thousands of your listeners do exactly the same as we're about to do now.
Oh yeah, we're going to get a lot of reaction to this because I'm sure everyone will disagree with us. But Ian, I mean, just thinking about it, because we're going from that first one and just to list them, 1989-90 under Dennis Smith, and then you've got the two Peter Reids, 95-96, 98-99. Then you've got Mick McCarthy, 2004-2005, Roy Keane in 2006-2007, and obviously the current one, 2024 and 2025. So if you put that into perspective, Ian, you're talking 35 years. I mean, when we're looking at these players, how do we take that into account? Because there's always a debate that goes on in terms of, how players from way back when would cope in today's game.
It's just like the old Pele, Maradona, Messi debate, isn't it? What you do for this purpose is you think they're all exactly the same age, playing in this mythical era that we're about to talk about. So, yes, of course. People say, it was harder in my day, or it's tougher now. But we're not going to take that into account too much, are we?
No, well, I hope not. But the other thing I take into account, actually, Ian, because you kind of touched on it briefly just before we started recording.
Yeah.
But maybe slight favoritism, because obviously you potentially knew a lot of these players.
Yeah. And and I think there's one player who I would have in my team. I suspect the two of you wouldn't. When I was doing this, you suddenly realise just how many very, very good and great players aren't eligible for this. For instance, Lee Cattermole has played more games for Sunderland probably than anyone bar 09 this millennium. And so anyone who has played exclusively top flight football for Sunderland, that is ineligible for this. And also, if you think about it, what we're talking about, anyone who has played for Sunderland since 2008 right up to before last season, they're ineligible either because they weren't involved in championship promotion squads.
Yeah, and there's another aspect to this. I've got a question for you both. When I was looking through this, so in the promotion season, so in 18, and this is talking about how to decide players on who was kind of eligible or, in the reckoning for some of these positions. But if you look at the promotion seasons, 1989-90, 12 players played over 30 games in all competitions. In 95-96, 10 players played over 30 games. 98-99, 11 players. 2004-2005, 11 players. And the most current season, 24-25, 10 players played over 30 games. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. In Roy Keane's promotion season, how many players played over 30 games in all competitions?
I would guess 2 or 3. I'm going to go 3.
I'll go higher. Higher.
That's cheating.
Well, Ian's got it absolutely bang on. 3 players.
Oh, really? Yeah, right.
Yeah. So the other one, you've got 12, 10, 11, 11, 10. Yeah. And in Roy Keane's promotion season, you've got 3 players who played over 30 games. And you look at some of the players and, that kind of, you've got like the Dwight Yorks and things who played 20-odd games and all those who came in on transfer deadline, and then he switched it up. So actually that was the season, really, when we've gone through, that was difficult to pluck players from, even though it was a fantastic season. And Martin, just from a fan's point of view, talked about to Ian about a journalist knowing the players. It's not easy from a fan's point of view because I think I've got one in my 11 that I doubt many others would have, because he was one of my favourite players. And it's almost like I can't let go. I'm not sure he's one of the best in there, but he's one of the favourite. It's a difficult thing to do as a fan, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I guess it kind of brings into question, what criteria do we actually use to pick it? Do we use performances in the promotion campaign? Do we use what they did afterwards? Do we use just what we, if we liked them or not? Will Marco Gabbiadini get a striking place in this 4-4-2?
I'm looking forward to that striking position.
It's a big question, isn't it? But yeah, look, I think there's got to be, given that we are creating a team out of the teams that won promotion for Sunderland in the 5 most recent promotions, I think there's got to be an element of performances within that championship winning season that come into this for us to select from. Some of those players left before they even had the chance of playing top flight football. Some of those players actually did better in the top flight than they did during that promotion season. So it's it's not going to be exact science. I think there's going to be some element of bias and favouritism and all that sort of stuff come into it, but it wouldn't be football without that, would it? So I think it's all fair game.
Yeah, that's it. Right. Well,
I think we've all got our own criteria in our own minds, haven't we?
I'd like to think so, Ian, but when I've been fighting with a few of these choices, I'm not quite.
No, and you know what? I've still got somewhere I'm not sure, so I'm waiting until we actually get into it.
You're waiting for Ian to convince you which way to go.
Well, I'm just going to sound out some choices because there's a couple of things that I've got right, and I actually did an 11 before I kind of looked back at the records and saw who played where, and there was one player I had in a certain position, and then I was like, oh, actually, in that promotion season, he didn't actually play in that position too much. So there's that bit to it as well, where you've got your own recollections, but then you look back at the records and you go, my memory isn't as sharp as it probably might have been.
Can I say to you how I devised this side when we did the episode looking back on all the promotion squads, Chris? I think we all agreed that the best promotions were out of these 5 by the proverbial mile was Peter Reid's 1998-99 side. So my criteria was using that side as a template. Which other players could get into that side? Now that's probably that's giving it almost a clue to how I'm going to do it. But because I instinctively knew that side was so much better than the other ones, I'm thinking, right, how do you strengthen that 98-99 side, which got to 105 points?
Interesting. Okay, well, I think you might have given us some clues as to who's in your team, but yeah, we do need to get into it because we've got a lot of good players to get through. But I'm going to lay down some rules to begin with, which I told Ian and Martin beforehand. We're going to try and build the team in a 4-4-2 formation because it's about time football went back to wingers and strikers, as far as I'm concerned, and B, it's just easier to manage, full stop, rather than trying to crowbar players into wrong positions. We're also going to have 4 subs. We're going to have a goalkeeper, a defender, a midfielder, and a forward, just to make us feel better when somebody misses out. And then we'll go through the picks from Ian, Martin, and myself, if I can actually decide as we're going through. And then we'll see if it's possible to do a joint 11 if we're close, or we'll just agree to disagree if we're miles apart. So let's get into it, and let's get into the goalkeepers. And again, so we'll just go through the 6 seasons. So it's Dennis Smith from 89-90. We've got Peter Reid's from 95-96 and 98-99, as Ian's just said. Mick McCarthy's title-winning side from 2004-2005. Then Roy Keane's title-winning side from 06-07. And, of course, the most recent one from 2024-25. So the 6 goalkeepers I have listed. I've got Tony Norman from 89-90. Then I've gone Shea Given from the 95-96 rather than Alex Chamberlain. Then we've got Thomas Sorensen from that 98-99. Thomas Myra, who played 35 games, I think, in that season, and from the 04-05 season. Then we've got Darren Ward from Roy Keane's title-winning side, and we've gone Anthony Patterson. So, Ian, you talked about 98-99. Is this an easy one?
It's a relatively easy one in that I am excluding loan players from my squad. Shea Given was quite remarkable. 12 clean sheets in 17 games. Was Sunderland's player of the second half of the 95-6 season. But no, it is Sorensen. I mean, Sorensen, funny, I must tell you a story. When I was covering an Ireland game in Copenhagen, World Cup knockout game a few years ago, and I asked one or two Danish journalists, would Thomas Sorensen be around? And they said, "Oh, you mean the bridge?" That's what he's known as. Do you know why he's called the bridge? Because he was the bridge between Peter Schmeichel ending his distinguished international career and Kasper Schmeichel starting. And incredibly, since about 1992 to the present day, Denmark have relied on 3 goalkeepers, the 2 Schmeichels and Sorensen. Sorensen was outstanding for Sunderland. I think he's remembered, sadly, by a lot of fans nationwide for a horrendous error in the second city derby when he was playing for Aston Villa. But I can't remember him making too many mistakes for Sunderland. He was an inspired signing from Ardennes, wasn't it? And was pretty much a regular for Sunderland for 4 or 5 seasons. Then he played very well for Aston Villa and Stoke as well. So, yeah, he's a comfortable choice as my number 1.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's crazy to think, Martin, that actually he was only 21 when he joined Sunderland. And I'm thinking about, he was, I'm sure he was recommended by Tony Corton, I think, because he was almost going to Manchester United, wasn't he, at one point?
I think he had trials, hadn't he, at Manchester United, from memory. And there was a lot of talk, obviously, with him being, as Ian's talked about, Schmeichel's kind of successor. There was a lot of talk about him being considered to replace Schmeichel at Man United as well. I think, Sorensen came in at a funny time, didn't he? Because Reid he'd never really fancied Alex Chamberlain, had he? And you see, he brought Shea Given in for that spell.
Well, just quickly, sorry, Martin, I was just going to say, just on the Chamberlain thing, because I got the feel, I was looking at the fixtures, and Given started the game after the Cup replay, and I think it was the Cup game at Old Trafford that actually Reid gave up on Chamberlain almost.
It was. And look at even that summer of that promotion season, I think that was the season that Reid tried to bring Brad Friedel to the club. So, there was all of this stuff going on where Reid never really fancied.
And Bogdan Stella, wasn't it?
That was 96, yeah. That was that summer as well. So, there was all that sort of stuff going on. That might have been before the Premier League season when signed Corton. He brought Corton in. Obviously, Corton got crocked at Southampton. Perez, who'd come in as sort of second choice and never really expected to use him, was thrust into the team. And even that summer, we bought Zoltan Bayer, who I think played a League Cup game and got chucked in the bin as well, didn't he? So Reid was always looking out for another goalkeeper. He was never quite happy with him. So when Sorensen came, that was kind of a big deal, wasn't he? Put him straight in. And look, the difference he made, I know lots of people would like Lionel in goal, but he was just too erratic, I think, for Reid, and too erratic for a promotion-winning side. So
I think that the playoff final, 98, he had a bit of a nightmare.
He did.
I think that was the time Reid said, "Well, this side can get promotion next season with a more reliable keeper."
Well, yeah, and more reliable central defence as well. You kind of will obviously skipping ahead, but there was a couple of defenders one defender in particular he brought in that summer as well, which kind of strengthened the back line. So Sorensen, look, he was exceptional, and he added a real sort of calmness and maturity in goal that we hadn't had. Despite his young age, he added a maturity in goal. And that was a massive difference in those two teams because, again, not wanting to skip too far ahead, but in that promotion-winning side, you lost Lee Clark and Kevin Phillips for massive chunks of the season. And, to still win the championship at the pace that we did, whilst two of our best players were on the sidelines, the goalkeeper had a lot to do with that because he just brought calmness to it and he was exceptional.
Yeah. And I want to talk about players, and I assume, Martin, are you going for Sorensen?
Well, now that Ian's ruled out Shea Given, because you know what, like I've actually got two sides jotted down, right? One's like best, one's favourite, and Shea Given in terms of, well, I don't know, it was a different conversation, doesn't it? But in terms of my favourite goalkeeper in a promotion-winning season, Shea Given. Like, the performances he put in that short spell were absolutely sensational. And I think you can't actually explain to somebody who didn't see them just how good they were.
Because he made some saves, didn't he? It wasn't like he had nothing to do in any of those.
Oh,
those hidden games. And that was the run that won us the title.
It wasn't the run of clean sheets. It was a game at Barnsley. I remember him getting absolutely battered. We were down 10 men. I think Paul Stewart got sent off in the first half, and we won 1-0. And Shea Given was battered from pillar to post. I actually don't think he played again for us. I think he was injured in that game. And that was
his last game because he didn't play in the last 6.
No, that's right. So, but I think it's one of those, unless you saw how good he was, you can't explain how good he was because he was so, anyway, he looked so slight. I know he's not the tallest, but he's still 6 foot, isn't he? But he was, slight. His shirt looked too big for him, but he got battered. And he was just pulling off save after save after save. And that in that promotion season win side, that was a difference maker.
It was. Shea's a friend of mine, and he'd get into my all-time Newcastle 11. So he can't be too greedy.
Well, I mean, again, just going through people who took them close. I mean, especially if you're not sticking in loan players, Ian. Then I want to bring in Tony Norman because he was one of my favourite ever Sunderland goalkeepers. He's one of the top picks if I had to do a list of my favourite Sunderland goalkeepers. But looking at that promotion season in 89-90, I was looking and Tim Carter actually played 26 games in that season. Tony Norman played 33. But I mean, Tony Norman was almost one of the last pieces of the jigsaw for Dennis Smith to take that team on.
He was, and it's quite sad in a way, isn't it? He's remembered by some fans for his last-minute clanger against Sheffield Wednesday in the 1993 FA Cup, which spawned a fanzine called "It's an Easy One for Norman." But that's probably the only mistake I can, a really bad mistake I can recall him making. Jumping ahead a bit, he would be my substitute goalkeeper. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Brilliant. Because, and actually, I was just thinking, I was staring at the space when you said he hadn't made one. I remember one where he tried to throw the ball out against Peterborough at home, or it might have been Southend, I can't remember, and his arm hit the post, and the ball just went into the back of the net.
I can't remember that. Right.
It was a Tony Daly against Aston Villa at Villa Park where
that's right.
Straight to his hands.
Yes.
There's two other goalkeepers I think are just worth mentioning because I think they are vastly underrated. Thomas Myra, and Darren Ward.
Yeah.
And I think both of them I kind of came from nowhere to play really, really important parts in promotion winning sides. The Roy Keane team, I think Ben Anick had started in goal, hadn't he, that season? And
right.
Quinny had heralded him as the new Jimmy Montgomery and all that sort of stuff. And
Mark Poom played 11 games that season.
For the Myra, sorry, I was talking about Darren Ward.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you're right. Sorry, Ben Anick played 12 games, Ben Anick. And then he had Fulop later on.
Fulop came in because he went the other way when Anick signed for Tottenham, didn't he? Fulop came the other way. But I think Darren Ward was an excellent goalkeeper. And even the season after, when Craig Gordon had a bit of a wobble. Roy Keane brought Darren Ward back in, and he kept a clean sheet. It was against Derby, I think he kept a clean sheet and kind of steadied the ship a little bit. And Thomas Myra was an excellent goalkeeper. They say Mark Poom started that season off in goal, but Myra, I think it must have been through injury to Poom. Myra came in. He was an excellent goalkeeper for us. He didn't probably get the chance he should have had at some point. And then you look at the next season when we let the two of them go and brought Kelvin Davis in. But that's a whole other story. But look, I think all things considered, Thomas Sorensen is a fairly safe choice for goalie.
Yeah, and Ian's going Tony Norman on the bench. You're going Shea Given Martin?
If I'm allowed him. If not, if not, I'm going to go for Darren Ward.
Oh.
Just because I think he actually played a really instrumental role in that promotion-winning side.
Well, I think me and Ian outvote you on Tony Norman, I think. So, but it is interesting how Darren Ward, as you say, is Darren Ward and Thomas Myra, until I went through. And it's interesting that I'd like to think I know a reasonable amount about Sunderland's promotion seasons. But these two seasons, I had to double check who was in goal. And it's a strange thing that it's probably a good thing that you're putting Darren Ward in there so you get some credit. Just quickly, Ian, we've talked about those kind of past goalkeepers. Where do you think Anthony Patterson rates amongst those?
Let's hope if we're compiling a team next season for all-time Sunderland, he'd be a contender. It's lovely, isn't it, when the goalkeeping position isn't a source of debate. I'm talking about the current goalkeeping situation. When you look at the worst season, or one of the worst in the Sunderland's history, under Simon Grace and Chris Coleman, when they didn't have a goalkeeper worthy of the name goalkeeper, and it suddenly became a massive issue. Sunderland historically have had very, very good goalkeepers. Jimmy Montgomery, Chris Turner, Thomas Sorensen, Patterson now, and I've left quite a few out. So it's a position that, thankfully, at the moment, you can take for granted. And I use that term advisedly, but I don't think there is a genuine debate currently that Anthony Patterson needs to be replaced.
Yeah. And I always think as well, Ian, people talk about a lot of reasons and defence or whatever, but I always remember when Newcastle lost that lead to Manchester United. In the same year, Sunderland won the title with Keegan when he swapped between Cernacek and Hislop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've mentioned Peter Reid was never convinced by Chamberlain, never really convinced by Perez. Kevin Keegan was never really convinced by Pavel Cernacek, God rest his soul. And I don't know if you can remember, but he brought in Mike Hooper from Liverpool to replace him, who had a bit of a nightmare time at Newcastle. But anyway, I digress there.
Well, Mike Hooper was another player that Peter Reid brought into Sunderland to try to solve the goalkeeping problem. He was on loan for a month.
He was, wasn't he?
I forgot all about reserve game.
I forgot all about that.
Well, we mentioned on it on this week. I was still staggered that Chris Woods never started a league game for Sunderland.
No, that's right.
The year we got relegated when he came into the club. But okay, right. Well, we've got the goalkeepers sorted, so we'll move on to the back four. We'll start with right back. And the six I've got from the six promotion seasons, and one of them might be controversial, especially with Ian's new rule that he's thrown in there. We've got John Kay from 89-90. We've got Darius Kabitsky from 95-96. Got Chris Macon from 98-99. Stephen Wright from 2004-2005. I've got Danny Simpson in there for Roy Keane's promotion season. And from the current one, I've got Trey Hume. So straight away, Ian, are we discounting Danny Simpson? And he did only play 13 games, so it's probably an easy one to cross him out.
Yeah, I'd cross him out. Yeah. For me, funny enough, I initially thought Phil Baldry, then I realised that he never played in outside the top flight for Sunderland. It's a relatively easy one again. Chris Macon, hard as nails, cemented his position for 2 or 3 seasons. Then he was surprisingly left out. An honourable mention, a very honourable mention, to Darius Kabitsky. Now, don't know if you can remember, but I think he was on the verge of equaling a consecutive games record from Sunderland.
He was.
When Peter Reid very controversially left him out. I think it was at Derby, bringing in Gareth Hall, who Gareth Hall was, I suppose you would call him a Peter Reid favourite, but he was never a favourite of the Sunderland faithful. And I think in this respect, the fans knew what they were talking about. Darius Kabici, he was very much a loner, from what I remember. Nice guy, very quiet, and he never let Sunderland down. I think he was a Mick Buxton signing from Aston Villa, and he just played and played and played, and very rarely had a bad game. But Chris Makin, he was a fierce tackler, very much in the try-Hume mode, and he got forward pretty well. And it would be between those two, but Chris Makin gets a nod for me.
Yeah, and interestingly, just you mentioned that Derby game when Darius was dropped for Gareth Hall. Gareth Hall gave the penalty away in that game.
I remember.
We got beat 1-0, I think, at the baseball ground, and it was Gareth Hall who gave. I think Ivanovic or something like that. It was or something like that. He fouled in the box, but yeah, I think it's tough between four, Martin. I mean, Ian's jumped straight in there and gone Chris Makin. Look, I think there's a lot of players, a lot of fans, from our generation screaming John Kay at this point. But, and maybe it was a sign of the times, I don't know. But he was very much an old-fashioned fullback in terms of he didn't score any goals for Sunderland in God knows how many games. And he very rarely crossed the halfway line in terms of, he knew where his position was. He knew what his job was. He did stray forward a couple of times and put a few crosses into the box. I'm sure he put one in away to Man City. I think, was it Man City in that final relegation game?
Well, he was playing left back on that day.
I mean, there's a lot of people screaming John Kay because it's this fan's favourite thing.
Look, John Kay was a good fullback. I think he's doing a bit of a disservice from my memory. He did get forward quite a bit. He was up and down the line, and he didn't score for us, but that's only because the referee blew the whistle against Millwall at home when he was literally striking the ball into the net for his first ever and only goal for us. So if the referee had delayed for a second or two, we might not have that record. But look, I think John Kay was a good fullback, and he kind of acquitted himself pretty well the season after as well. Howard Wilkinson probably doesn't think so, but he did. But look, John Kay was a good, solid fullback. Darius was a really good, reliable fullback as well. Darius was quite similar to Kay in the kind of respect he never scored and didn't ever look like scoring. Chris Makin, excellent player. Actually, going back to the John Kay season, when you look back at the records, I think Ruben actually played pretty much the first third of the season at right back. I think Kay was injured. So you've got a game sort of quarter in that promotion winning side to take into consideration. Making excellent fullback, and he's another one who could play both sides. So look, there's another good conversation and debate to be had, I think, because I don't necessarily agree with Ian that Makin's a shoo-in, I have to say.
So Kabici pushed him comfortable rather than shoo-in.
Well, see, I'd go for Trey Hume. I think
more strings to his bow.
I really think he's got a higher ceiling than Makin has. I think if you look at how he's developed over the seasons at Sunderland, he just keeps getting better and better. I think as a fullback, he's got absolutely everything, and he's got a goal threat as well. So I think he's a really good footballer. I think he can step into midfield, he can link play up, and I just think as an all-round fullback. In modern, again, you're kind of using the lenses of time to make some judgments and stuff on other players, but I just think Hume has got everything that Makin had and a bit more to add. So Trey Hume would be my choice in my team, I have to say.
Well, you're right about his ceiling. I mean, he's one of a number of players in his current squad who I believe will take to top flight football like a duck to water.
And that's the difficult thing when you're looking at the current side, because we know the ceilings of all the players who who went before because we saw them all play out. That's kind of what makes it an interesting conversation. I just think, even if you just judge it right now on form in the promotion winning side, I just think Trey Hume, even if you even for his goals, he scored some really valuable goals this season. His dead balls, corners, I think set pieces, great. So I just think he's got more about him as an all-round footballer.
Yeah. So I don't know if has Martin done anything to sway you, Ian? Or are you set?
I'm set. Trey Hume's an interesting one. Again, like Patterson, I'd love to think in a year or two down the line that he would be a contender or possibly even in the side.
Yeah, right, interesting. Well, we'll move into the central defence. So we've got I've got Gary Bennett and John McPhail from Dennis Smith's side. Then I've got Richard Ord and Andy Melville from Peter Reid's first promotion. Then I've got Andy Melville and Paul Butler for his second promotion. I've got Stephen Caldwell and Gary Breen from Mick McCarthy's side. Johnny Evans and Naron Nosworthy from 06-07, which might be controversial. And from the most recent season, I've got Luke O'Nien and I've got Chris Mepham written down because he played 37 games. But, if you guys want to talk about Dan Ballard, we can talk about Dan Ballard. Now, let's start with the two of Peter Reid's promotions, because his first one, Ian, in terms of Richard Ord and Andy Melville, I think their careers were really coasting and going nowhere, I think, at Sunderland until Peter Reid came through the door and he completely changed their careers.
Richard Ord would be on my side. Outstanding footballer whose career was hampered by injury. The three players from that decade, I believe, would have gone on to have illustrious careers, but for injuries, he was one of them. Kieran Brady and Michael Bridges are the others. I thought Richard was a tremendous footballer. He broke into the side very, very early on, and he formed a wonderful partnership with Andy Melville, who would be the other player. Actually, so they would be my two centre-halves, Andy Melville, Richard Ord. I remember when he left Sunderland, he joined QPR for, I think, £650,000. Didn't play a single game for them. I think, did Sunderland know something that QPR didn't? I don't know. But Richard, hometown lad, I can also remember being invited to his testimonial dinner. I think it was at the Howley Spring Cricket Centre. And it was on the night that Newcastle played at Nottingham Forest when they were in contention for the title. And I think it was a 2-2 draw, which made Manchester United overwhelming favourites. And obviously, when news came through to the 500-strong gathering there was a fantastic atmosphere. And no one was celebrating Newcastle's demise that night more than a certain Nicky Ord.
Well, I mean, Martin, talk about those players because Ian's jumped in there with his picks from that side. But just going back a step, Gary Bennett and John McPhail from the previous promotion season, and you said there was a bit of turmoil with Ruben Agboola played a lot of games, and it was a little bit in terms of settling that back four. But those two were pretty much in there the whole time, and we've talked on previous pods how much we liked how much Gary Bennett came forward almost like a sweeper and came out from the back and joined in with the attack, and John McPhail was just a brilliant defender.
He was, and the thing with the two of those is that they complement each other really well. Benno would have a bit of a wander sometimes, and McPhail was a steady sort of presence at the back who would keep things knit together and tight. And I think obviously John McPhail the season after played the first game of the season against Norwich and then left the club. Benno played the whole season and continued in the team as well. And he acquitted himself well in the top flight, Gary Bennett. I think he, as a player, he probably should have played more top flight games for, in his career than he probably did. Ord and Melville are an interesting partnership because that promotion season under Peter Reid was really built on defence. We didn't actually score that many goals, but we were solid and tight, and teams couldn't get through us. But when you look at it on paper, you think there's probably a little bit of pace missing in the partnership. If you're going to pick an 11, you can kind of afford to be a little bit fussy, can't you? And there's probably a little bit of pace missing if you have Ord and Melville together in a best team. Obviously, Melville won promotion twice with Sunderland. He was quite a strange sort of set of circumstances, wasn't it? Because after we got relegated and after the Reading debacle,
that's right,
Peter Reid paired Craddock and Williams together, didn't he? And they kind of went through that season playoff final, as we talked about Lionel Perez in the playoff final, and Reid making his mind up about Perez in the playoff final. I think he probably made his mind up about Williams and Craddock as a partnership in the playoff final as well, because Mendonca kind of had the run of them, didn't he? And he must have thought, we need some stability, we need a little bit more physical presence here. And Paul Butler came in and was brilliant as a centre half. And I think he really acquitted himself well the season after as well in the Premier League. So, there's conversations there. I think, Johnny Evans.
Just quickly before you leave Melville and Butler, for two centre halves to be playing together all season, those two both played exactly 52 games that season in all competitions.
Yeah, right.
That's incredible.
Consistency. That's what you want, isn't it?
That's it.
And then you look at Gary Breen and Steve Caldwell. I think we talked about it the other day. I think that promotion side that McCarthy managed to get up, I don't know how he got them up, because you look at it player for player, and it was kind of a sort of ragtag and bobtail outfit, wasn't it? Really, he got players left, right, and centre and put them together, and such an underrated job McCarthy did to get that squad up. And obviously the season after was a bridge too far. But Steve Caldwell made a big difference that season. I think we got him on free from Newcastle, didn't we? He made a really big difference to that defence that season. But then you look at the Keane season, and again, lone player, Claxton. Yeah. But Johnny Evans coming in was, again, a pivotal
it certainly was.
Change of personnel in that side. And he turned Nyron into a centre-half. Because there was no way in the world Nyron was a centre-half before Johnny Evans got hold of him and got the partnership going. And again, as a partnership, pace and physicality and nous, those two complement each other beautifully. And then, you've got, Dan Ballard, Chris Mepham, Luke O'Neill from this season. And, on the pod that we did for goal of the season earlier, or last week, wasn't it? I said O'Neill would be my player of the season for this season. So, you got player of the season playing centre-half all season from promotion inside to chuck in. So I think there's a fair amount of competition for the two centre-half spots.
Yeah. And
listen, Johnny Evans would be a strong contender, but for my self-imposed rule of no runnies.
Well, I'm not actually sure whether I said my fullback choice, but my right back choice was Trey Hume. And it is interesting with the Caldwell Breen one, because it's one of these. It's where the debate goes, Ian, and we were talking about this before we recorded, that if you go for a one-off season, Stephen Caldwell and Gary Breen that year were absolutely fantastic, but they're probably quite low down on this list purely because of what happened around it.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I mean, what we are doing is picking team based largely, but not totally, on their performances in the promotion campaign. And neither of them, and this sounds quite harsh, I consider, good Premier League players. Neither really have pace. And, when I'm looking at those two compared to Ord and Melville, you might argue that they didn't do an awful lot in the Premier League, although let's be fair, I think Melville had a very good career after Sunderland at Fulham. But I'm certainly happy with my choices. Melville, apart from the fact he could drink everyone under the table, so he had low points in his time at Sunderland. But when you look back, the highs far outweighed the low points.
Yeah. Well, I think he didn't have the greatest of luck at Roker Park, because didn't he get accidentally sent off when he played for Oxford? He should have been sent off, I think. And then Mike Ford got sent off instead, and the referee picked the wrong fella.
I think so. Yeah.
I forgot about that. But so I've gone Andy Melville as well, Ian. He's in my side because I actually think you think of that Peter Reid promotion size, 105 points. You think Alan Johnson, you think Quinn and Phillips. But Andy Melville at the back, the way he started off attacks and how he was on the ball that season, I thought he was just like a Rolls Royce that season. He gets my pick. The other one, I do apologise, Ian, but I'm breaking your rule. I am sticking Johnny Evans alongside him.
Not going to argue too strong against him.
I just think at a player for his age to come in and do what he did and just drag us by the scruff of the neck up the table almost. He did have some help, of course, from some of the other players, but he was fantastic. So, Martin, we need your choices in central defence.
I had Melville and Butler written down as my two central defenders.
You had them written down, or they're still?
Well, I've still got them written down.
Right. Okay.
But, I think Johnny Evans. I could be very easily convinced to put Johnny Evans in. He would certainly be my third choice, and have him on the bench if he's not in the starting 11. But I just think for the games, as you were talking before, the games that Melville and Butler played together, the difference that Paul Butler made coming into the side, and the fact that Melville was a consistent performer in two promotion-winning sides. Yeah, that's my rationale for those two.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Paul Butler, incidentally, he maybe I've got a little bias against him. He always refused to speak to the press.
Well, he went on to be an Irish national, didn't he?
He did. That's right. He did.
Yeah. With his, of course, really strong Manc accent. Yeah. Right, so we'll go on to left back, and I've got Paul Hardiman, who just incidentally that promotion season, scored 9 goals in 50 games, which not many fullbacks I think will achieve going forward. And then we've got Martin Scott, Michael Gray, George McCartney, Danny Collins, and Dennis Sirkin. So, Ian, we'll start with you, because actually that Paul Hardiman, his just numbers from that season are incredible, really, aren't they? I mean, there were 6 penalties. There's 6 penalties in there.
And also, he played quite a few of those games in midfield, from what I remember, on the left side of midfield. Listen, some good players there. My choice is the obvious one, Michael Gray, who was a fixture in that Sunderland side for a long, long time, and became one of the few players in the last 50 years to be capped for England without having played he had played a top flight game, but while playing in the second tier. Now, again, a little bit like the right back slot, it was an easy decision and it wasn't an easy decision. I was a huge fan of Martin Scott. Martin Scott came to Sunderland in a swap deal with Gary Howes, and Gary Howes served Sunderland very well. He was one of the shining lights during the miserable Mick Buxton era, and he was what I call just a classic left back. He could defend well. He didn't surge forward in the way Michael Gray did, but he was capable of putting in good crosses from the final third of the pitch. Michael, though, he was at his best. He was one of Sunderland's best attacking weapons, and also I can't recall too many players who had the energy levels of Michael Gray at his peak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm making an assumption about you, Martin, but if you go the same, because talking about Martin Scott was touted to be potentially in an England squad after Sunderland got promoted in this season. But would anyone? I mean, I'm going to assume it's Michael Gray. It might not be, but who runs them close if not?
Well, do you know what? There was a player who I actually had down as my left back, and then I looked back at his promotion-winning season, and I realised he actually hadn't played left back a great deal in that promotion-winning season. Yeah. That's Julio.
Yeah, I did the same.
I think Julio Arca is the best left back we have had in probably 20, 25 years. I think if he played more at fullback for us, I just think he's got everything, because he was actually better than Gray going forward. He was a better defender than Gray. I just think Arca at left back, I think we kind of underutilised him at fullback. He often played left midfield for us. I just think he was such a good left back. It was that first season that we were down there under McCarthy, wasn't it? He played left back more often than not, because McCartney played centre half a lot in that first season. And then when Caldwell came in, McCartney went back over to left back, and Julio went a bit further forward. But I don't remember that. Do you remember that game at Bradford, at Bally?
Yes.
Early in that season, and Julio scored that goal where he just picked the ball up in his own half and ran and chipped it over the goalkeeper. Like, absolutely superb. I would actually go with Martin Scott.
Ooh.
Because I was never convinced by Gray defensively. I thought he could be got at. And I think if you look back at Martin Scott's career, suddenly he was left back, as Ian said, through that spell under Mick Buxton, and Reid came in. Reid loved Martin Scott. Every time Scott was fit, he played left back, and Gray went elsewhere. In the promotion winning side in 95, 96, whenever it was, Gray actually played a lot on the right wing.
Right wing, that's right.
Because he couldn't get into the side on the left-hand side of the pitch. And Gray only got back into the side of left back because Scott was injured. And even, I think Scott came back in the January and played a few games. Did he get injured at Lincoln in the FA Cup or something? But that's kind of opened the door back up for Gray. So I actually think Peter Reid, if Gray and Scott were both fit, Reid would always choose Martin Scott. And then injuries kind of let him down. So I would actually go with Martin Scott as a really fantastically good left back who, he could get forward. He took a good free kick, took a good penalty. And I just think as a full back, he had an awful lot. About him.
I think your criticism of Michael Gray is very similar to the debates that go on about in this present day Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think by definition, a attacking left back is stronger going forward than defensively. And Michael, yes, he could get hurt by tricky wingers, but he had pace and he always had the energy levels to get back. He was very rarely caught upfield.
No, he didn't. Look, I think again, if you, it's hard, isn't it? If you're picking the team, you got to be mindful of the left winger as well.
Yes,
who we might come on to. But if I'm going player for player, and you've got the personal favoritism comes into it to an extent as a fan as well. And Martin Scott was more sort of my kind of player the way he came across than Mickey Gray was.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Well, we'll move on to the midfield and we'll go into right midfield. The six I have are Gary Hours, Steve Agnew, Nicky Summerbee. I've got Dean Whitehead, which might be controversial for that Mick McCarthy promotion. Then I've got Carlos Edwards, even though he didn't play a huge amount of games in Roy Keane's side. And I've got Patrick Roberts. Ian, we'll start with you. Again, you keep going back to the 98-99 season.
Yes.
And I'm going to assume that none of the others push Nicky Summerbee enough on this choice.
Wrong. The player the two wide midfield stroke wing positions were the two I had the biggest debate on. And the player I've gone for is Carlos Edwards. I can't recall a player, an attacking player, making such an impact when New Year's signing. I thought he transformed Sunderland. I thought, watching him, I confess I knew very, very little about him. He was he in his late 20s, even 30 when he came to Sunderland. Absolutely. He was the catalyst behind that lengthy winning run under Roy Keane, which led to promotion. And his goal against Burnley, which all but clinched promotion, would certainly rank in my top 5 goals seen at Stadium of Light.
Interesting. So I assume he just pipped Summerbee then?
Yes. I mean, Summerbee, I remember there was almost a Beckham-esque quality about it, wasn't he? He didn't beat his man, but his crosses were absolutely superb. I know that Niall Quinn would crucify me if I didn't have Summerbee in the side because he loved having him on the right wing. Summerbee, I remember learning, am I right in thinking he had a slightly misshaped foot, right foot, which helped him with his crossing. But right. I can't recall him beating a man, but I can't recall him putting in a dud cross either. So very, very close. But it was just that impact that Carlos Edwards had in that Roy Keane side.
Yeah. I mean, Martin, I'm clearly getting these assumptions wrong because I assumed Martin's at left back and I assumed Ian's at right midfield. So I'm going to stop doing that, I think. But on that right midfield, Martin, and I've mentioned, Ian's gone for Carlos Edwards. Summerbee, I thought, was potentially the favourite. But you've got Gary Hours in there as well. 56 games and 9 goals that season.
Well, it's interesting when you look back on that, because how much did Hours actually play out there? Because Pascoe often played out there as well, and Armstrong played on the left a lot of the time. So I've got a feeling Hours did play out there, but he wasn't necessarily the right winger or the right midfield player the whole time. I mean, he did play there more often under Martin Crosby during the cup run.
Just quick, I actually thought if he'd nailed it down early in his career, Gary Hours could have been an international at right back.
Well, Dennis Smith thought that, didn't he?
Hmm.
That was, and he had the potential to do so. I actually went with Edwards as well, and he only played 15 games in that season.
Yeah, no. 5 goals though in those 15
but
games.
He could score goals. Now I actually think his crossing was, almost as good as Summerbee's. I think he put a great ball in, but he just had that pace, he had the trickery, he had the goal scoring. I remember him, he played against us for Luton, I think in December of that season, or maybe December or early January. And I think we beat Luton 2-0, but Edwards played really, really well. I think that was the game that convinced Keane, right, we need to get him in and kind of supply the front line. And I just think, again, Keane's season, it was a kind of season 2 halves, wasn't it? Because he brought, Evans in, he brought in, and they came in January, transformed that side and really got us on that run that we just kept going and going and going. And the season lasted exactly the right amount of games to get us to the top, didn't it? But I think Edwards was a great player, and he was just unfortunate the season after. I think, didn't he break his leg? Actually, that game that Darren Ward played in goal against Derby, I think Edwards leg in that game, and he wasn't out for too long. He was out for maybe 2 or 3 months, or maybe a couple of months, and that kind of really scuppered him as a Premier League player because he had an awful lot to offer, and he's one of those players you look back on. He probably didn't actually play that many games for us in total, but he was such a good player, and you just would love to have watched him play week in and week out for 3 or 4 seasons because he had a lot.
Yeah. Definitely, and definitely a season of 2 halves because 30th of December we were 12th in the table after a defeat at Preston. But let's go into the middle of the park because this one's a really tough one. List of players I have on my shortlist were Paul Bracewell, and I did have Gordon Armstrong actually. You can get into that with your debate, Martin, in terms of who played where that season. And then I've got Paul Bracewell again for Peter Reid's first season, Kevin Ball again for Peter Reid's second season, and Lee Clark, Jeff Whiteley and Carl Robinson, which goes into the argument of how the hell did Mick McCarthy's side win the title that season. Then I've only got Dean Whitehead from Roy Keane's season. Again, we talked about how many players played a lot of games that year, and from the most current one, Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham. I mean, Ian, I'm not quite sure where to start there because that is some list of players.
It certainly is a list of players, and I'm going to start with, I guess, a confession and an apology. I can remember when Kevin Ball was switched to midfield. I thought this was a classic case of square peg in round hole. He was a decent centre half, and I just, in my mind, he was a centre half. But I can also remember once he absolutely bollocked me for doing a piece. I think it was, I can't remember what game was back, but Steve Agnew had recovered from injury, and I said Peter Reid will be able to field for one of the first time his first choice midfield of Steve Agnew and Alex Ray. And of course, Bally used to read every single word, every turn this road. I get on absolutely brilliantly with Bally. I actually spoke to him the other day, and we'd been talking for 10 minutes. And then I said, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm in Crete." I said, "Oh, thanks a lot. I haven't been ringing on WhatsApp." And he had that evil little laugh, which he had. But listen, every side needs a captain. He was an outstanding captain. He was an outstanding ambassador for the club, and he would be my first choice in midfield. just pipping Paul Bracewell. Do you want me to go to my second choice now? Or
Yeah,
do you want to?
brilliant.
Right. My second choice is Joe Bellingham. Listen, I heard your podcast with the excellent Phil Smith yesterday, and you've got to agree, it's a great move for Bellingham. It's great money for Sunderland, and it's a big but, and Phil mentioned it, what a hole he leaves in that midfield. What I loved about Joe Bellingham was the way he accepted responsibility. In the midfield traffic, he was happy to pick up the ball. This season, he developed unbelievable upper body strengths, which gave him that ability to shield the ball. And he had wonderful industry. His passing was good. Yes, occasionally there was the odd midfield misplaced pass, but he was also a superb tackler. And I think Joe Bellingham and Dortmund have obviously think this as well. He's got all the ingredients required for a real top of the class central midfielder.
Yeah, and I mean, I've gone again this favouritism thing, but I've gone Bracewell and Ball. I don't know, maybe looking back at rather than the most recent players that Ian was just talking about there, but not sure who you went for, Martin.
Well, I think Kevin Ball is massively important. I think even, not only as a player, but as a captain of a side that you're going to put together. And Bracewell, usually instrumental in 2 promotions with Sunderland, really made a difference both times. He was one of the only additions to both teams. The first one finished kind of mid-table the season before, got into a playoff place. The second season when Reid came in, Bracewell was pretty much the only first-team signing that started the season from the side that almost got relegated. So, in terms of making a difference to a squad of players, Bracewell was class. I completely agree with you, Ian, about Job and how, even as a fan, to watch his development and progression and improvement over the space of 2 seasons has been a joy to watch, because he is, compared to the lad who played that first game of the season, the first couple of games of the season in his first year, compared to the lad who played at Wembley, my God, I tell you what, that development has been unbelievable. And I'm going to be watching German football for the first ever time next season to see him continue that. The one player who neither of you have mentioned, who would absolutely be a shoo-in in my midfield, is Lee Clark.
Of course. I mean, listen, Lee would be a contender for my Newcastle side as well. I like Lee a lot. I know he did a podcast with Roker Report a few years ago, where I thought he was so magnanimous and unapologetic about what happened before the cup final at Wembley. I know he's talked about that. So he loved his time at Sunderland. He loved working with Peter Reid. He made friends for life with the likes of Michael Gray and Kevin Phillips. And what a wonderful player. And yes, I agree that those 2 seasons he was absolutely outstanding, and it's a fair point. And if the 2 of you go for, well, I know you haven't gone for Clark, but no, it was Chris hadn't went for Ball and Bracewell. But if the 2 of you had gone for Clark, I would not have put up a strong argument against it.
I say when you're looking at the side, all the midfield players that we've talked about, with the exception of Clark, don't score goals that much. Job has added a few in the season, but again, he's not at the moment, not to say that he can't be in the future, but at present he's not a 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 goal midfield player. Lee Clark, I tell you what, for a player for 2 seasons for us, I think he was by far and away the best midfield player in that league. I thought he ran games from start to finish. He could score goals. He could do everything.
Just quickly, because Martin, he got into the England squad when he first joined us. He got into Glenn Hoddle's squad for Le Tournoi, as it was in the summer of '97. I mean, how much do you think that, and I don't want to say kind of messed up, but do you think he could have kicked on with us if he'd actually stayed with us in the Premier League?
I think he could have been a great player for us in the Premier League. And it'd been really interesting to see how he actually did, because he joined Fulham, didn't he?
Yeah.
And did he go back down to the...
He went back down to go up, didn't he?
He did. So, for him to go up in the side that we had, in the setup that he had, in the role that he had in that team, because if you remember the first season that he came in, he was captain for a lot of the time because Kevin Ball was out for 3 months. So he had a leadership role at the club. He was universally loved by the supporters. It's hard to kind of, again, unless you actually were there at the time, it's hard to explain to people now because people know what transpired with the T-shirt and all that sort of stuff. But Lee Clark was adored at Sunderland. And, for a player, if he'd gone up into the Premier League with us in that situation, he would have taken that next step. Look, he probably didn't have that turn of pace for an international player and a really top, European player. But he could have achieved an awful lot more, I think, in his football career if he, if he'd wanted to stay with us when we went up.
It was close for me between Lee Clark and Kevin Ball, but what won it the day for Kevin Ball in the end was, and if you pound for pound, Lee Clark is a better footballer than Kevin Ball. For me, it's just as simple as that. But
you'll be getting a phone call from Crete, mate.
but Kevin Ball did things like, fly from the halfway line to score a diving header against Chelsea, and he set up a goal at Wembley by winning a header he should have never won. And he did these things. He went above and beyond, so he got my.
He nearly scored an own goal with a header in the famous route of the derby, didn't he?
Yes,
with a tackle. It was a tackle, wasn't it?
Yes,
it was a tackle, wasn't it? That's right.
Tackle from wasn't it from about 30 yards out or something?
I think it was about 40 yards, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure Alex Ray tells a funny story when he sees it flying over his head and he thinks, oh no, it's going in. But just to double check, just to confirm, Ian, your 2 picks for the middle of the park?
Ball, Bellingham.
Ball and Bellingham. And Martin, just to confirm?
Bally and Lee Clark.
Bally and Lee Clark. Okay, well, let's move on to the left-hand side. So the list of 6 I have, actually I've got 7 because again, I thought I'd throw them in. I've got Colin Pascoe and I've got Michael Gray because he played down the left most of that season in Peter Reid's first promotion season. Then I've got Alan Johnson. Then I've got Julio Arca because he played on the left-hand side of midfield for most of that Mick McCarthy side. Ross Wallace, who played probably the most games on the left-hand side for Roy Keane. Then I've got Enzo Lefebvre and Romain Mundle from the most recent season. Ian, we'll start with you with that list.
I'd love to think, again, as I mentioned with Patterson Hume, that the last 2 names you mentioned there are real contenders in a year or two's time. This was the hardest choice for me between Alan Johnson and Julio Arca. I'm going for Alan Johnson. The reason is because telepathy, it's an overused word in football, isn't it? People talk about the Quinn Phillips partnership. They talk about Beardsley Cole. They talk about Sheringham Shearer, etc., etc. There was genuine telepathy on that left flank between Michael Gray and Alan Johnson. Michael Gray, he didn't have to look. Alan Johnson didn't have to look. They knew that at a certain point, the other was going to be on their outside overlap. Alan Johnson wasn't just a great. He was twinkle toes, wasn't he? He was a typical Scottish winger, old-fashioned Scottish winger, a bit in the Jimmy Johnson mold. He could tie a player in knots with his footwork. He could play on his right foot. He scored a few goals. Now, he was also, and I liked Alan, and I think I once told him this, one of the stupidest players. And I mean stupid in the sense that he had, if not the world at his feet, Sunderland was a great stage for him. And after winning promotion, and I think he played virtually all that season, was virtually ever present, he allowed his contract to wind down because he wanted to join his boyhood club, Glasgow Rangers. Peter Reid was furious, ostracised him for a spell, and I don't think he didn't kick a ball in the top flight for Sunderland. Listen, Julio Arca was a wonderful player, and I feel always guilty in not including him, because if you could accuse Johnson of being disloyal to Sunderland, then Julio Arca was unquestionably the loyalist import the club has ever had. For that reason, I'm going to again jump to the substitute because it was such a tight call. Arca would be my midfielder on the bench, but Johnson gets it primarily because of that relationship he had on the left channel with Michael Gray.
Yeah. And it's interesting looking at the list, Martin, that actually out of that list, I was surprised at this because I just thought Alan Johnson had scored the most goals, but he scored 8 in 47 games in all competitions, and Julio Arca scored 9 goals in 41 appearances in that promotion season in all competitions, right. which surprised me.
Yeah, no, I would have said Johnson had more goals, certainly. It's a very difficult decision, this one. And it is for me. It is between two. It is between Johnson and Julio. And I didn't put Julio left back because I couldn't really. But they're both very different players. While they're both tricky, obviously Julio would go on the left, Johnson would cut inside and go on the right. And I haven't included Michael Gray inside the left back, so you haven't got the telepathy aspect in my team. I'm gonna if I leave Johnson out, I'm going to upset Kelvin, aren't I? I don't want to upset Kelvin. But I don't know. It's a tough one. First, whichever one I don't pick, the other one's going to be on the bench. I did have Johnson scribbled down in my side when I put my side down earlier, but it's a tough one to call.
And I just correct myself. I said he didn't kick a ball in the top flight. Of course, he did. He broke into the side later on in the earlier top flight campaign. And did he score the last ever goal at Roker Park? He
scored the last ever league goal, competitive goal.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And didn't he play for Middlesbrough in the Premier League or not?
No, he did. I mean, he basically, he allowed his heart to rule his head, went to Rangers. I don't think it particularly paid off for him. And his career was not the career that we all thought that he was going to have when he was waltzing down the wing for Sunderland.
Yeah. So is that confirmed? That's concreted in, Martin?
Julio Johnson.
Julio Johnson, the perfect left midfielder.
Alan Arca, you can take your pick.
We're going for Johnson.
Yeah. Go on. Toss a coin territory here, like.
Because then actually we've all got the same substitute in midfield. Actually, just one thing I realised I quickly missed. Just your guys' substitute defender. I went for Richard Ord because I went for Melville and Johnny Evans. But just quickly, your substitute defender was? Well,
if you're going to pick it on, I would go for Evans. If you're just picking on player, if you're actually picking the side, you'd pick Luke O'Neill for his versatility because he could cover every position in the back four and central midfield, which you'd need if Arca was your midfield sub. So
let's not get bogged down with details. Who's your sub defender? Johnny Evans. Okay, and Ian, who was your sub defender? Just
mine, and I wouldn't normally put a left back, but I'm going to put Martin Scott because he was such a good defender for Sunderland. I think he would have been capable of switching inside. And of course, if a left back was injured, he could always replace a left back and Bally could go into his old position at centre half.
Okay, interesting. Right, so that's our midfield sorted. So let's go to the forwards, which I think at first I just thought this was a shoo-in, and me and Ian were joking last time we talked that this might be a quick one, but we've got Martin on with us. And I can see it in his face. His heart's almost breaking already because of his love for Marco Gabbiadini. So let's go through those choices. And we've got Marco Gabbiadini and Eric Gates from Dennis Smith's side. I then got Craig Russell and Phil Gray, even though they didn't score a huge amount of goals that season for Peter Reid in that first promotion title winning side. Then we've got Quinn Phillips, Marcus Stewart and Stephen Elliott for Mick McCarthy's side. Then I've only got David Connolly for Roy King's side. It wasn't when I look back, it was actually quite difficult looking at it. It wasn't blessed with strikers who were banging them in that season. And then in our most recent season, we've got Wilson Isidore and Eliza Mayenda. Ian, I can see Martin agonising still and still trying to think through it. So Ian, we'll come to you first because look, Niall Quinn, again, actually Kevin Phillips, when we get into it, Kevin Phillips was injured for a big chunk of that title winning side. But in 32 games in all competitions, he scored 25 goals. which is just absolutely ridiculous. And to have two strikers like this, Niall Quinn played 42 goals, 42 games in all competitions, and scored 21 goals. To have two players score over 20 goals in a season is almost kind of unheard of at any level now because of the way football is now. But I mean, those were the days really for strikers. You looked around at any side, especially in the top flight, Ian, and it was just full of strikers.
Yeah, listen, as far as I'm concerned, there is no debate. It's Quinn and Phillips. The only debate I would have about those pair is where they stand in the great strike forces of the last 30 years. Yes, there's Bergkamp, Henry, there's Beardsley, Cole, there's Shearer and Craig Bellamy. There's some wonderful, wonderful partnerships, and that partnership, if not the best, it's right up there with the best English football as seen in the modern era. Sunderland have had other good strikers, but again, they were the first two names on my team sheet.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly though, in terms of working together, because obviously, I mean, they did it so well. But you had a different partnership with Gates and Gabardini, where it was with Quinn it was a ball up to the top, but with both partnerships, the Quinn and Phillips partnership, Ian, and the Gates and Gabardini, the mid, which I think is and again I might sound like a dinosaur, I think it's a problem with modern day football. Those two partnerships made the game so simple.
Well, they dovetailed, didn't they? I mean, Eric Gates would go into the pocket and he'd slip the ball through to Marco Gabardini, evidenced in the famous playoff win at St James's Park. It was more the big man, little man, wasn't it, with Quinn and Phillips? They got great supply from left and right. And if it wasn't always a case of Quinn knocking it down to Phillips to lash home, then they invariably were instrumental in each other's goals. With now Quinn, I can remember so many people remarking how skillful he was, said they didn't realise he was just so much more than a beanpole striker. There's an argument for saying he was the most technically accomplished player in that side. So wonderful, wonderful control, could hold the ball. And listen, it's no coincidence that Sunderland's decline, and you could say Phillips, not decline, but his least effective seasons in a red and white shirt after Niall Quinn left, retired.
Yeah. I mean, Martin, now I was joking at the start with a Gabardini thing, but does he actually come close in breaking up that Quinn-Phillips partnership?
No, not really, unfortunately. Yeah. I think when you look at...
It's a nice thought.
Oh, look, I think, it's kind of, again, different times. I would have loved to have seen Marco play in that team, because I think whether him and Phillips could have played together, I'm not too sure. Maybe Phillips later in his career could have played alongside Marco nicely. I think Quinn and Gabardini could have been a really interesting partnership as well. But I think when you look at the impact that together Quinn and Phillips had, and the partnership they had, and the understanding that they had, and how the side played to their strengths, the team was set up to get the best out of Quinn and Phillips. And when he had Lee Clark again coming in to pick up any loose bits from midfield, he had Summerbee on one side, Johnson on the other, putting the balls in, threading the balls through. And again, it's one of those, you can watch YouTube clips and see videos of snippets of the two of them playing together. But until you actually, if you weren't there to actually see the two of them play together, again, you kind of think you're over-egging the pudding, describing them, as Ian did, in terms of like how good they were as a partnership in comparison to some of the world's best that we've seen. But they genuinely were. And, I just think, the two of them, you put the two of them in any team, in any level of football in the world, they would score goals and cause problems. Like, that's how good they were. And I think, together they were magnificent.
Yeah. I mean, Martin, as Ian said, I feel very, very lucky to have seen these in the flesh play for Sunderland in red and white stripes. Because as Ian said, Martin, that when we look back and, you look at all the Premier League years and things like that, we had a strike force that people now still look back on as Ian said, as one of the best. And they are up there, that when people think of partnerships, people think And if this is an era of a lot of strikers, when people go through the strikers that couldn't get into the England squad at the time, like your Les Ferdinands and your Robbie Fowlers, who would be a shoo-in now, you're talking about an era of great strikers, and these two will come up in the conversation straight away when people talk about partnerships in this era.
When you look at they are mentioned in the same breath. The one I forgot, Drogba Zola, there's another one. And, people to this day, if you ask someone whether they're living in Norwich or Birmingham or Southampton, name the best partnerships in Premier League history. I know we're talking promotion here, but probably the Quinn Phillips partnership would crop up.
Yeah. Yeah. And Martin, in terms of how they worked, I mean, a lot of them, we think about the long ball up and a Quinn flick on and Phillips' goal, which, okay, it happened. But I don't think when you look back at the goals, I don't think it happened as much as people think, because actually the goals, Quinn made a lot of the goals himself, and so did Kevin Phillips.
Oh, look, I think it's easy and kind of lazy, isn't it, to think that it was a long ball team when you look at the kind of makeup of Quinn and Phillips together as a partnership. But the two, and this was a great thing about that side, because we could score goals in any number of ways. We could score goals with Johnson bringing the ball through, slipping the ball through into the box to Phillips to finish off. We could score goals with getting the ball out wide to Summerbee, Quinn bringing it down his chest and volleying it in. You could score goals with making or Mickey Gray lofting the ball up to Quinn to hold it on his chest, or a flick on. And we had a number of routes to goal in our armoury. We weren't predictable, because we could do a number of things. And even if we were predictable on occasion, we were almost impossible to defend against because of the quality that they had. So, and I think, again, Ian's right in terms of the technical ability of Niall Quinn. Even when we signed him, I was thinking, lanky beanpole was going to be playing long ball football. And I'd seen him play on TV for Arsenal and Man City, but until he actually watched him week in, week out, he didn't fully appreciate. And, to be fair to him, it wasn't really until he came back from injury in that first season at the Stadium of Light where we actually saw it week in, week out. But when you saw how good he was with the ball at his feet and the skill he had to flick the ball around, and can you remember that goal he scored against Port Vale where he lobbed it over the goalkeeper and chipped it over the goalkeeper in the top corner?
And he was celebrating before it hit the back of the net.
He was wheeling away before it hit the back of the net. But even when you watch some of the goals he scored back in the Premier League, when he takes the ball in his chest and volleys it in, the playoff final against Charlton, beautiful couple of goals that he scores. And, it's just, he's such a versatile, great player that, he again, lazily, he gets kind of labelled as a target man. And he actually wasn't a target man in the traditional sense of a battering ram. He wasn't a battering ram. He was just an all-round, complete, brilliant football player.
Can I interject there, just on the subject you mentioned about, because Peter Reid used to get pretty angry when people labelled Sunderland a long ball team. I can always remember at a press conference away from home sometime, and he said, the only long ball I advocate is the ball from touchline to far post, which, when you think about it, can be a 50-yard cross from, 40-yard cross from the wings. And what Sunderland were, they were a side that exploited width more than anything else.
Yeah. And to this day, it's some of the best football I've ever seen a Sunderland side play.
Brilliant.
Can't call them long ball.
It's one of those funny things with Phillips as well that season and the season before. He used to miss more chances than he scored. He missed some sitters. And, the amount of goals he scored, plus the chances he missed. The next season when we went to the Premier League, he pretty much hit the back of the net with every chance he had. But, if he put away the chance, honestly, he could have had 60-odd goals in the season if he put away the chances that he got.
Yeah. Well, like I said, 25 goals in 32 games because he missed a big chunk of it. You're almost into Brian Clough type figures with that.
Unbelievable.
And obviously, eventually he broke the record. So, Ian, just to double check, because obviously you've got Quinn and Phillips, who was your sub striker? Because we haven't mentioned a lot of the others, but they didn't score half as many goals.
It's again quite an easy one, with apologies to Marco. It's Michael Bridges. Apart from the fact he was a super sub in the 1995-6 season, he was just supremely gifted. And you could argue one of the unluckiest footballers the club has ever had, not just because the injuries which ultimately finished his career, but also because he was behind the two greatest strikers Sunderland have had in the last 50 years.
Well, yeah, it is a bit ridiculous that let's say Quinn and Phillips got injured for that season. I still think we would have won the title with Ditchio and Bridges up front.
Yeah.
Martin, is it an easy one for you on the bench?
Yeah, Marco, 100%.
Okay, so that finishes our team. So what I'll ask you to do, Ian, just to clarify, could you go through your starting 11 for us very quickly with your subs, please?
Sorensen, Makin and Michael Gray, Dickie Ord, Andy Melville, Kevin Ball, Joe Bellingham, Alan Johnson, Carlos Edwards, Phillips and Quinn, subs, Tony Norman, Martin Scott, Julio Arca, Michael Bridges.
That's some side. Martin, if you could do the same and go through yours, please, to confirm.
Sorensen, Hume, Melville, Butler, Scott, Bally and Clark in midfield, Edwards and Johnson on the wings, Quinn Phillips up front. I'm going to name 5 subs, I'm sorry. Given, Evans, Julio. I don't think you can leave Paul Bracewell out of that conversation. Like, he's one player really stands out like a sore thumb, not being included.
Well, I will include Bracewell as my 5th sub.
There we go. We'll have 5. We'll overrule Chris Ian. We'll have 5 subs. Majority rules.
Right. So just quickly trying to put together off our picks and trying to put them together. We've got, I think, as a general consensus, we've got Sorensen in goal. Hume got 2 picks at fullback, so we went Hume. Melville got 2 picks, so he's at centre half. We're struggling on the other one because we all went different. Although Johnny Evans and Richard Ord got 2, so one of them 2, I think. And then we've got Mickey Gray at left back. We've got Carlos Edwards, got 2 choices, so he's on the right hand side. We've got Job and Kevin Ball in midfield.
Oh, you went for Job, did you as well? Did you?
Oh, sorry, I went for Bracewell and Ball, but didn't Ian and yourself go for Job?
I went for Clark.
Oh, you went for Clark, and alongside
Bally.
Yeah, so Bally got 2.
Bally got 3. Bally got 3, and then
Bally got 3,
and then the others got 1 each.
Okay. So we were slightly undecided in midfielder. Although Bracewell was on old benches, so potentially Bracewell, but Bally was the first on the team sheet there. Alan Johnson got a clean sweep on the left-hand side, and then Quinn and Phillips up front, which isn't a bad side, gents. And I think we gave an honourable mention to all those who could have made it. But I mean, again, we talked about this, Ian. We looked at the strikers, and when we were looking at them, you're talking Wilson Isidore and Mayenda scored 13 and 10 goals. But actually, they were both kind of, Isidore was subbed in 20 games. Mayenda was subbed in 15 games out of those 26 starts. I mean, it's almost, when we're comparing these things, it's almost a different game in some ways, isn't it?
It is. Wilson Isidore has to convert himself from a scorer of great goals to a great goal scorer. He scored a fine goal at Coventry, but he had a disappointing second half of the season. And I think, being very, very harsh, I think the jury is out. I think a lot of fans who maybe 6 months ago thought if Sunderland got up, he would make it in the Premier League. I think there are question marks about him. Mayenda, well, it's just very much a case of just being raw. He's got a high ceiling. He could be anything. This time next year, we could be saying that he couldn't quite do it at the highest level, or we could be debating his possible move away from Sunderland, becoming the next very, very expensive outgoing.
That's it. And yeah, we might get chatting onto that at some point as well. But Martin, that was a tough one, but we got there in the end.
No, we didn't. Look, it would be interesting in a year or two's time to do it, because the players who've just won promotion, if Patterson has a great season in the Premier League, called up for England, that puts a different complexion on him. The save that he made in the playoff final, if you're talking about promotion-winning teams, that save he made in the first minute of the playoff final is again a pivotal moment in us getting promotion. So you can argue all sorts of things, can't you? But I think the way the teams are set up, first of all, in terms of going forward, strike partnerships and all that sort of stuff, kind of make it difficult for modern players to get in when you compare them to the likes of Quinn Phillips and even Gates and Gabbiadini going a bit further back. And the amount of squad rotation that happens now, you're going back to Melville and Butler playing 52 games each or something in the season. Like, it wouldn't happen these days. So you've got that squad rotation thing to take into consideration as well. But, then saying all that, we've put in Carlos Edwards, who played 15 games in the season. So, you've got that bit to consider. But look, I think there's some players who've got promoted this season. Mayen de la Fay, Job, obviously Ian mentioned him. Romain Mundle. If they go on to have 2 or 3 good seasons after this.
Chris Rigg,
of course. We didn't even mention Chris Rigg a great deal. Dan Neil, he could go off and do whatever in the next couple of years, and you're looking back
we may as well mention the one who's up in Dennis Circuit. I label those 2 fullbacks as a pairing. We're told by Troy Hume, Dennis Circuit. I know that he's highly rated by at least 2 Premier League clubs.
Yeah. So, you've got an awful lot of good, I think people shouldn't take this as us going, the current team isn't anywhere near as good as what went before, because I think, there's probably some, it's the experience of watching how the played the careers out and what happened next. Because, if Quinn Phillips had gone and flopped in the Premier League, do we still put them in this team? Who knows?
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this thought, gentlemen. If I was doing a side of the 35 years I've covered Sunderland from 1990 to 2025, including the players who weren't involved in promotion side, then
that's the next pod.
Well, I would say there's only 5 of the side I've named today who would survive the cut.
Ooh, well.
So there we are.
Join us next week for...
And I can hear you kind of wobbling when you're talking about some of these players, because actually one player, I'm just kind of, again, just staring at the numbers. I mean, we didn't even talk much about Gordon Armstrong in the midfield, who played 59 games in that promotion season and scored 13 goals from midfield. And we didn't even consider him, hardly came up in the conversation, which is incredible and shows how good these sides. But I think we should leave it there before we start going back on any of our choices, because we've done it now. It's locked in. It's forever to be debated, and we're going to be told that we're completely wrong, of course, on social media. So we can look forward to that. But Ian, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I think, we may already have the start of the next pod. So thank you very much for that.
It's great fun. Great fun.
Good stuff. Brilliant, Ian. And thanks again, Martin. Of course, you'll be back, or we'll be back with another on this week. Any kind of hints of what might be chatted about?
I'm quite looking forward to this week, because we record them towards the end of the week, and then they get published on the Monday, don't they? And Andrew Smithson is I think when I grew up, I had posters of Marco on my wall. I think Andrew had posters of Rob Mason on his wall, because he loves he just loves the old history stuff. And there's a couple of players he's thrown in for this week who when he said the names to me, I'm like, I have not got a clue. So he said there's some very interesting tales to talk about. So I am very much looking forward to recording this one, because I think all of us learn something or other, don't we? We've got Kelvin's first-hand memories of watching some players that we've only read about and seen grainy footage of, which is always fantastic. And Andrew's a genuine fountain of knowledge and has all sorts of things that he's researched and found out that, again, obviously love my history of Sunderland, but it doesn't extend to the extent that Andrew's does. So, no, all good fun, all good stuff. And obviously, being June, you're scratching, there's no games played, so you're scratching around for other things, which leads you down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, well, we go back through the newspaper archives, and we'll pull all your stories out, Ian, to get what happened on this week back in June. So, thank you very much for that.
The football season never ends. 52 weeks a year, isn't it?
Absolutely. And and if anyone hasn't listened to that, to last week's On This Week, again, Andrew goes through some brilliant stuff, but Calvin talks about Dave Watson, and it's absolutely fantastic if anyone gets a chance to go back to listen to that. But on to today. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. We do really appreciate it. And of course, we have loads on the website, or pretty much daily releases on How We're the Podcast. So look out for those. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.